Okay, so we're going to keep going with quantified logic. And for 17, we're going to finally start seeing things that have specific instances of persons or beings. Specifically, we have some little letters. That's not a little letter. That's a little letter. Socrates and Aristotle. So let's go up to the sentence. The sentence says that if Socrates is not a philosopher, so Socrates we know is going to be little s, but not a philosopher, then, so we have an if-then statement, Aristotle is not a philosopher. Then we have Socrates, it's little s, being a philosopher is part of the category of being a philosopher, px, Aristotle, little a, philosopher, px. Now this one's not going to have any actual quantifier. Why? Because we're only talking about particulars. If you only are talking about particulars, there's no quantifier. There won't be a universal or an existential x. Instead, we say that if Socrates is not a philosopher, then it follows that Aristotle is not a philosopher. Now going on to 18, what we have is not all animals are rational. So there's two ways to translate this. If you have a not all, you can translate it literally as not universal x, or you can translate as there exists an x such that something, 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 something. Then we have two categories. We have the category of animals, and we have the categories of rational beings. So let's go with the first one. It is not the case that for all of x, if x is an animal, then x is rational. We could also say that there exists an x such that x is both an animal and not rational. These are going to be equivalent translations. Let's go on to 19. There exist. This is going to be an existential x. And then we have two categories. Categories of animal, ax, and category of having a soul, sx. So there exists some x such that x is both an animal and x has a soul. On to 20. We have an if-then statement. We also have an all bats are mammals. Then we have an existential claim of some. Now let's take a look at what categories. We have categories of bat, categories of being a mammal, and a category of mammal again, and a category of having wings. So let's start with bats are mammals. We're saying that all bats are mammals. In other words, for all of x, if x is a bat, then x is a mammal. And then for some mammals have wings, we would translate that as there exists some x such that x is a mammal and x has wings. If that seems confusing, let's just go ahead and write it like this instead. My and wy. Then we put an arrow in between the two. So if for all of x, x is a bat, then x is a mammal, then it follows that there exists some y such that that y is both a mammal and has wings. And onward. This one is a little bit longer, at least for the descriptions, but that's okay. So all birds except penguins can fly. So we have a category and we also have a universal quantifier, all birds except. So except means not. And then can fly. So we have an implicit conditional statement here. And we also have three categories. Category of bird, category of penguin, and category of flying. So we would translate this as for all of x, if x is a bird and x is not a penguin, then it follows that that x can fly. This is probably the best translation of this one to use. Now we get to something in 22 that's a little bit different. We have an all and only. This is a biconditional. Then we have two categories. Category of circles and the category of being perfect. we're also going to be talking about everything. So for all of x is a circle if and only if x is perfect. Now this is probably going to sound a little bit wonky because you might be like, but there's other things that are perfects that are not circles. And that would be a critique of the content of the sentence. But for all and only, we translate as a biconditional. Let's go on to 23. 1 fails the course when blowing off the final exam. So 1, well, there's 2 ways to do this. So actually, let's do, this is the broad. So 1 fails. So this is going to actually be a universal. When, let's put that as an if they. So all folks fail the course if they blow off the final exam. Then we have blowing off the final exam. It's bx. We have fails the course. That's an fx. In this one language, we have an implicit px. We have an implicit person. And we're talking about every single person that takes this action. So we would translate it as the following. For all of x, if x is both a person and x blew off the final exam, then they fail the course. So this weird, like, one language, it has an explicit reference. Namely, it has an explicit reference of people. Because we wouldn't say that, oh, 1 fails the course if when blowing off the final exam, and say, yes, indeed. When a tulip blows off the final exam, they fail the course. No. If something is a tulip, it's not actually taking the course at all. So we want to be specific in the scope of what we're talking about. On 24. If any explorer. So this is going to be talking about all folks that fit this category, discover gold, then he or she will become famous. So we have the category becoming famous, fx. We have the category of discovering gold, dx, and the category being an explorer, ex. So if any explorer discovers gold. So we could translate this as follows. For all of x, if x is such that they are both an explorer and they discover gold, then it follows that that person will become famous. Being an explorer who discovers gold is enough to make somebody famous. Now on to 25. Humans are featherless bipeds. So this has an implied universal. We're talking about everything that fits into this category. We have the category of human. And then we have something that, in this case, is going to be telling us something about those humans. Namely, everything that is a human is also a featherless biped. Though not everything that is a featherless biped is necessarily a human. So we would translate this as follows. For all of x, if x is a human, then they must necessarily be both featherless and a biped. We wouldn't find anything out there in the world that is, in this case, human and not a featherless biped.